Everywhere we turn in nature, we find 528 Hz. Chlorophyll, which helps plants draw energy from light and gives them their green color, vibrates at 528 Hz. The bees that pollinate many of these plants buzz around at 528 Hz. And the rainbow that completes this picturesque scene has 528 Hz at its heart as well, as it reflects the same greenish-yellow light found in chlorophyll. The air we breathe also contains 528. We know that oxygen, for instance, carries these 528 resonating electrons. The basic structure of organic chemistry, the carbon-6 hexagonal ring, reflects the sacred geometry of 528 Hz frequency. But the frequency's significance in the natural world isn't limited to this planet. In fact, when recordings of the sun made by NASA scientists are compared to a tuning fork, we find 528 Hz there as well, at the heart of the star which is the center of our solar system. In 2010, there was a disaster at an oil rig owned by BP called the Deepwater Horizon, causing it to leak millions of barrels worth of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. An electromagnetic energy expert, John Hutchinson of Vancouver, along with his wife and research partner Nancy Hutchinson, decided to do something to help. They placed a device that emits frequencies on the beach about 25 feet from the water and used 528 Hz and other solfeggio frequencies to treat the water. They only did this for 4 hours, but the waters had miraculously cleared by the next morning. In fact, the water had so improved that dolphins, fish, and crabs returned to the area when just a day before those same waters would have been lethal for marine life. Of course, such an incredible story as John and Nancy Hutchinson's experiment in the Gulf of Mexico is sure to attract skepticism. These skeptics included Dr. Robert Naiman, an analytical analyst with decades of experience. But when he and his company, Analytical Chemical Testing Laboratory, Inc., tested the samples, it removed all doubt. The Hutchinson's method had reduced the amount of oil and grease from 7 parts per million to less than 1 part per million. In other words, the waters they treated had contained huge amounts of oil, and now they contained almost none. The official statement by the Analytical Chemical Testing Laboratory, Inc. states, "While the technology is not completely understood by the undersigned, it is clear that the process may have extreme value, and it should be given a chance to be presented and tested on a large-scale basis." But this wasn't the first, nor the last time that 528 Hz has proven itself in science. Glenn Ryan of the Quantum Biology Research Lab in New York conducted an experiment where he exposed in vitro DNA to different styles of music. He converted the music to scalar audio waves and used a CD player to broadcast it to the DNA. Ryan then tested whether the music had any effect on how much UV light the DNA absorbed. DNA absorbs UV light when its helix unwinds. And the results? The Gregorian chants, which used the solfeggio scale, caused the DNA to absorb significantly more light. Rock music, on the other hand, had no such effect. Though that experiment included other solfeggio frequencies, 528 Hz has shown the ability to heal DNA all on its own, and is used by biochemists for just that. Apparently, 528 Hz's effect on the surrounding water helps heal the DNA's helix. Biochemist Steve Comiskey was quoted in the book The Fork in the Road as saying, "The 6-sided clear clusters that support the DNA double helix vibrate at a specific resonant frequency, 528 Hz. The late Dr. Candace Pert, an American neuroscientist and pharmacologist who discovered the opiate receptor and the cellular binding site for endorphins in the brain, said that the energies and vibrations of these frequencies affect us on a cellular level, opening our chromosomes and exposing the DNA. Dr. Horowitz once predicted that musicians shall remedy what ails humanity, and it's the musicians that are heading the charge to bring 528 Hz back to the people who need it. In fact, the legendary John Lennon may have paid the ultimate price in his attempts to spread the love frequency. The music researcher Lunar Tuner recently discovered that the mega-popular song Imagine was actually recorded in 528 Hz. If you ever wondered why this song is so compelling and reaches so deeply into your soul, you know now. Dr. Horowitz has suggested that this earned Lenin the ire of the military-industrial complex, which is headed by people that profit from the chaos and conflict that grips our world, and that it was they who had Lenin assassinated. That's pretty heavy stuff, but it hasn't stopped musicians from trying to share the love. For example, the musician Scott Huckabee performs and records all of his music with A tuned to 444 Hz, which coincides with C at 528 Hz. Veteran piano designer and tuner Daniel Kohler has created prototype pianos that use the A at 444 Hz tuning in an effort to demonstrate its benefits. Could helpful frequencies like 528 Hz and other solfeggio tones create positive changes in our cells' vibrations? It seems very likely from what we've seen, but we're still waiting on modern medicine and science to catch up with what the ancients have known for at least 1,000 years.
XRP 589 mystery solved. I'll leave that up to you. This is a new update on an ongoing series. I think this is video number 3. I'll try to share the other videos at the end screen for you can take more of a look into that, because those are solid as well. And we're going to expand with the research, believe it or not, to Jake Claver. I know that sounds crazy. With his research on the domino theory. Tie it all in, so consider smashing the like. Let's get right into it. So you just saw from that intro a few key things. I have gone ahead and decided to pause it in some of these key areas. So number one, I want to basically share this with you, okay? So let's go ahead and recognize a few things. So for one, you see here analytical chemical testing and the logo. I think these logos matter, and basically the reason why I want to highlight that is because even right here, well, Ripple Labs. Remember how it used to be called Ripple Labs before they just changed the name to Ripple? And again, call it coincidence, call it whatever, but it's interesting, again, to see the symbols and whatnot, the logos, they all matter. And the other area I want to jump to is basically a little bit further up in this, we see, basically speaking, where it mentions, I believe, right here. So we see here, healing frequencies of the human body, full list of benefits. Now, I'm not saying, of course, Ripple has healing frequencies or any of that, right? But we're trying to get into the nitty-gritty about frequencies, and I've covered on this channel quite a few things lately when it comes to frequencies. So in this symbol, I think it's interesting to also see the correlation to things like even this. And why point this out? Well, again, this is from CoFin aeventos.pt, and it's bank's adoption of real-time settlement DLT. If anything, 2020 to 2025 for cross-border real-time gross settlements. Shout out to Jesse APX Crypto Insights. He shared this numerous times, and we see here basically even with that. Now, I get it, right? That in itself could seem more of a coincidence, but again, if you look at that and then you jump back to what we shared right here, it does make you wonder. It absolutely does make you wonder. The area I want to jump into is in that demo, you heard specifically mentions of like quantum, right? And again, the whole idea of frequencies when it comes to that, okay? Well, speaking of all of that, let's jump also over to this. David Schwartz shared a while back, July 26, 2022, cold wallets that hold any XRP and have never performed a transaction are already quantum resistant. Also, if you disable the master key and set a new regular key, your account is quantum resistant until you perform another transaction, and then you can change it again. And like he also pointed out, one last thing, unlike some blockchains, once quantum resistant algorithms are deployed, XRPL users will not need a new receiving address to take advantage of them. Existing accounts can be re-secured. So if anything, this allows XRP to be quantum resistant. Draw your own conclusion about that. All right, how about this? Just in case you're wondering, do blockchains use frequencies? Well, they use all sorts of frequencies, and of course, we have to define it in a certain way. We see here basically on a basic search, yes, blockchains can interact with or use frequencies in 2 distinct ways. And more importantly, as you see here, it says technically through specific networks designed for high frequency data. And it also mentions legally/operationally by managing physical radio spectrum frequencies via decentralized ledgers. And if anything, they give a really good example here that I think I want to point out. So there is a project, and I don't know if I do a deep dive on that on the Patreon and whatnot. That's something that we do over there in the community. But there's a thing called Frequency, and it is a network. They have a specific layer 1, and it's literally called Frequency. And it's designed to support decentralized social applications at scale using the Decentralized Social Network Protocol, the DSNP. There's, of course, purpose on all that. I don't want to focus so much on that, but they do have a mechanism that operates with the parachain connected to Polkadot. Lately, I have covered a little bit of Polkadot integration to things like the quant Overledger and why that matters, but nonetheless, you see here they even have physical frequency spectrum management, and it does allow for blockchain technology to be used to manage and share physical radio frequency spectrum. So again, I want to point out that there are things like that out there, and it's not just me trying to share some crazy conspiracy stuff, right? Which, let's be honest, I have been, but I'm trying to spark interest, and I'm also trying to spark and expand your horizons of realizing that when we talk about some of these things and get really deep into it, it's like, is there any blockchain and DLT tied to some of this stuff? And it's like, yes. And then we research the patents, or we research all sorts of things, and it just becomes mind-boggling, does it not? So we also see here decentralized access. It helps tracking, exchanging rights to use specific frequency channels in distributed manner, often for who or what telecommunications or IoT Internet of Things. That's so interesting. And they do have an example. I think this one's good. French National Frequency Agency has used blockchain of frequencies, just in case you're a doubter, for managing frequency reservations, allowing for transparent real-time registration of frequencies, especially for wireless microphones. That's super interesting. They have operational frequency, and I think this part's important because when we talk about Ripple, we know that it can scale. We've seen some documentation. People are still so locked and loaded when it comes to, oh, it only could do 1400 or 1500 TPS, and that's it. But we've shared documents on this channel, numerous ones, right? Numerous deep dives, that it's not only millions, it could actually scale to trillions of TPS. And again, I know some people will just click right out of that when they hear that, but I've actually showed real documents about that. So check out the video section if you haven't seen some of those videos, okay? We see here, basically speaking, blockchains have an internal frequency speed at which they can process transactions, often measured in transactions per second, and more importantly, operational frequency, etc., etc. Block times, new blocks are added, such as Bitcoin's roughly 10-minute interval, LOL, right? Why am I saying LOL? I might just laugh. What is wrong with me? Anyway, let's get further into this. But in summary, while most blockchains themselves do not use radio frequency, specific projects like Frequency exist. So that's a great example, all right? Now, let's take you over to the juicy stuff, okay? Some of my own research, I'm very proud of this. Hopefully you guys will enjoy this. Don't want to create controversy when it comes to NASA and everybody else's theories on you know what. So let's just try to focus on the subject matter. I did try to go to ntrs.nasa.gov. They blocked me. I don't know why. Maybe I was trying to uncover something. Who knows? But I had to get into the Wayback Time Machine. And in doing so, I found it interesting what I found here. And here's why this is really, really interesting. If you were to go over to this particular URL that you see here and try to get into the specific document, which is literally from Lewis Research Center, dates all the way back to May of 1984, about spin rig and its use in vibrational analysis of rotating systems. It mentions specifically this right here in figure 17 of an umbrella mode at 589 hertz upon shutoff, and et cetera, et cetera. Obviously referring to rotational blades and, you know, all sorts of things. Now you may be thinking like, oh boy, like, you know, what is that all about? Does this have anything to do with anything of reason? Yeah, I'm ahead of you, right? But I do find it interesting that when I went to this other part of transmission research and activities over at NASA Lewis, let's jump back to it, Lewis Research Center, I found this, and this is on page 21 of 32 of the document. This is crazy. It says future plans include installation of an online computer-based system on the single mesh gear fatigue test stand. That's, what is this? What in the world? And it says, for example, objective will be to continue to evaluate most promising gear failure detection algorithms and develop new methods. Also, the online system eliminates the data acquisition problems mentioned above. All right, is this just a giant coincidence with the terminology? It could be. Again, I'm not saying I have all the definitive answers here, but I do feel as though it's interesting that when we mention specifically what you saw from that intro, this bottom part mentions what? In addition, oil debris monitoring methods are being investigated as a diagnostic tool. Now, you have to keep in mind that when we went back to that video, that the intro, again, watch it again. Remember how they said that that would be extremely valuable, that type of technology? Yes. Don't believe me, go back to it, watch it again if you need to, pause it, rewind it, watch it again, okay? That's interesting. Now, when we get further into it, let's take you over to superlearningscholar.com/commerce. And if anything, where do we go with this? Oh, where we go with it is, again, recognizing when they mention, for example, these concepts of what we just mentioned as far as a single meshed tool, okay? And I think that's important to basically cite that, okay? So for one, the terminology is really something. And if anything, I'll show you what I'm talking about. This part, page 17 of 32, specifically mentions this. And it says, basically, from the transmission research activities at NASA Lewis Research, a comparison study was performed on 4-gear dynamic analysis computer programs developed under NASA with the Army. These programs are what is called GRDYN-MULT, which is a multi-mesh program applicable to a number of epocyclic systems. A single mesh program, okay? A multi-mesh program applicable to a planetary with 3 planets. Again, a single mesh program. Okay, so interesting. This bottom part. In general, the programs predicted similar dynamic load and stress levels as operating conditions were varied. All right, say what you want, but distributed ledger technologies and all these projects on layer 1s, they have to be able to scale, right? Everybody has to have the same user experience. There's a correlation here when it comes to these computer programs and so on. Could be, I don't know. I do find the findings interesting. Taking more into this, we see here from superlearningscholar.com/commerce, they point out, we were never building for the old world. Think about the terminology here. We were just preparing for what comes after. A third alert blinked onto the center table. This one slower ceremonial. Quote, U.S. Treasury launches tokenized debt redemption schedule, 37 trillion legacy debt migrating to public XRP ledger, phase 1 initiated. They are putting it on the chain. Now, I want to highlight that. Well, here's why. As the saying goes, boil it, mash it, stick it in the stew. Said for the first time in hours, leaning to the glow of the hollow map, validator routes, sovereign trade corridors, digital commodity bridges, they all flow through a what? Single mesh. Now, is that the biggest coincidence in the world? Could be. Could be. This all could be a giant nothing burger, right? But it says not owned, not controlled, just maintained, trusted by code. Again, code. And we know that when it comes to distributed ledger technology, blockchain, and so on, we use what? Binary. Zeros and ones, right? Trusted by code, verified by time. Single mesh. Again, go back, rewind. Go back to those documents from NASA about single mesh, just in case you missed it. A lot of mentions about that, right? And if anything, what did we also highlight? This right here about what? Umbrella mode at 589 hertz. Again, frequencies. This is so interesting. Now, is that all I have? If that was all I had, that would be kind of weird. I'll be honest. This is where apparently Jake Claver comes in. Now, I have nothing personal against Jake Claver. If anything, he has shared some really interesting things. He's been featured, obviously, on Good Morning Crypto, Good Evening Crypto, shout out to Abs and all those guys, right? And they have shared a lot about the XRP domino effect. So in the process of looking more into 589, this came up. Do you find this more than coincidental? Is this where Jake Claver got his domino effect theory? I don't know. I don't have those answers. I'm not Jake. But what I do want to point out is, basically speaking, where I just cited the whole thing of basically what you saw here with single mesh, and what we cited here as far as single mesh program from NASA/Army sponsorship, it led us down the rabbit hole, which linked us to the XRP domino effect theory. And of course, I said to myself, this sounds familiar. Of course it sounds familiar, because Jake Claver literally came out with this on March 14, 2025, and we'll get into this. He says a while back, he put out his XRP domino theory video. Financial systems aren't just connected, they are deeply intertwined in ways most people don't see and can trigger massive chain reactions. Right, where most people don't see all this. We're trying to intertwine it all. We're trying to go deep with this, are we not? We also see here, let's blow this up, some other key things that he mentions. And so for one, you see here where he says, basically, let's go over his predictions where last year and how it's playing out, how economic forces in Japan, U.S. Treasury markets, and traditional finance could push XRP into mainstream use. Not speculation, but it's essential infrastructure. Then he goes out to point out, again, Japan and the digital yen. I've been covering that a lot myself too, especially with my Jasmine coverage, which I'll have some updates later, which I'll be honest, most of you guys don't care for whatever reason, but you should. Japan's economy, I should say, is waking up after decades of stagnation. Their stock market is climbing toward 1980s highs. They're already ahead of all G7 nations in developing a central bank digital currency. I'll share this as well, and I'll show you what I'm talking about as far as that goes, just in case. Let's go back for a second, because we know that according to documents, when we talk about the global RTGS, how we remove friction costs and everything when it comes to risk and cross-currency transactions, you need a DLT for it. In particular, you need XRP. And we see here, XRP is part of the global RTGS, correspondent banking, and obviously liquidity providers. Boom, all there. And did we talk about Japan, Mr. J. Claver? Yes, we did. We have these connections with the Interledger protocol to allow XRP with the XRPL to connect to what? Boom, the Bank of Japan, and of course Zenjin for those local payments. That's so major because, again, understanding the correspondent banks and, like it says here, liquidity providers. So I just wanted to mention that again, pound that home again. So we see here, again, nations in developing a central bank digital currency, according to Jay Claver. Down here, we see here, Japan is the biggest foreign holder of U.S. treasuries. For years, Japanese institutions found U.S. bonds more profitable than their own, but in the digital yen, it makes keeping capital in Japan more attractive. What did we discover in the United States recently when it comes to specifically the Regulated Settlement Network, the RSN? We saw a lot of mention of specifically what? Canton. I got to mention Canton just for a brief minute. If he's going to mention U.S. Treasuries, I got to mention that. I would highly recommend people look more into Canton and its use case. It is not going to replace XRP. It's a complementary infrastructure. We see here down here as well, Jay Claver points out the whole thing that those institutions might start pulling out of U.S. debt, potentially triggering a major sell-off. This is where the first domino could fall. He points out this as well, U.S. Treasury market shock. If Japan starts dumping treasuries, confidence in U.S. debt could plummet. Other holders, China, Saudi Arabia, private investors might follow suit, creating a snowball effect. You also see here, the timing couldn't be worse. The Fed has pushed interest rates up. The yield curve is basically inverted, historically a warning sign, and the Fed itself has stepped back from buying bonds. Is he quoting stuff just from what you saw from that site? He could be, and that's fine. He's giving his own perspective, and, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. But here's where I'm going to pause real quick, and I think this is good. Jay points out, then there's the wild card. Everybody's covering this. Everybody, for years now. I've literally seen this mentioned for at least 4.5 years or more. He says, USDT, as in Tether, this stablecoin has been buying loads of U.S. treasuries to back its reserves. If the treasury market becomes unstable, stablecoins may not be stable as everyone assumes. Okay, let's talk about that. We have to talk about that. Because if he's going to point out that stablecoins like Tether are the glue holding crypto markets together because they provide liquidity, and like he says, ease cross-border transfers and have become, like it or not, critical to global finance, that means basically things like collateral, right? Pairings. You have to have something to buy the underlying asset. We know that. We jump on over to some research I did with Rube Black and obviously Crypto Future, right? Rob, we got really in deep when it comes to specifically this, and it's USAT. Let's refresh the screen on this one because it's a nice little animation. It says from USAT, as in Tether USAT, dollars that move without intermediaries. I like how they literally show half of that dollar or $100 bill being tied to like the matrix. Most people are not reporting on this at all. All you will see from mainstream, and again, nothing against, this is not a jab on Jake. I have nothing against Jake, okay? It's no jab on anybody, really. It's just most people are only covering USDT, but nobody, for the most part, is covering USAT, and it's a huge deal. And I'm not just saying this because, oh, hey, look at me, I'm covering it, and, you know, shout out to Rue Black, and, you know, Rob, we're all covering it, oh, we're cool. No, it's not about that. We don't really have egos when it comes to that, but I want to point out more people should cover this, and it's so important that they do. It says dollars that move without intermediaries. Listen closely on this, and if it goes past your head, again, pause, come back, do whatever you got to do. You got to share this. You got to get the point across. Even if your family's starting to understand some of this, you need to listen thoroughly on this, because there's one narrative when it comes to Tether as in USDT, and there's another that is big that isn't being reported. So let's get into the fundamentals of this. Dollars that move without intermediaries. I'll say it again, without intermediaries. Tether introduces USAT, dollar-backed stablecoin designed for the internet age. Spend, send, and receive money instantly right from your phone. No intermediaries required. Pure freedom. Again, if we were looking at just regular Tether, we'd be like, yeah, right? We'd be like, what a crock. And I would agree with that statement. Jumping further down here, it says USAT is made in America. It says here basically the power of the dollar in your control. Yes, your control. And again, it's a stable coin. It's got digital money that lives on the internet, not in a vault. It's designed for one purpose, to always be worth $1 US. Now, some people will be like, what a crock. Only gonna be worth $1 US? If that's the case, what about the power of the dollar? Well, good point. But until we get things pegged to other things like digital euros and so on, which is happening, by the way, they are currently still pegged to, obviously, the US dollar. Now, of course, there's a whole thing going on, obviously, in the Middle East, and it's the struggle for just that, dollar dominance, right? So we see here, basically speaking, it has 1-to-1. It's always 1-to-1, simple and transparent. And no, I'm not paid by USDT to talk about this. We see that it's also redeemable for US dollars, backed by fully backed liquid reserves. Okay, moves at internet speed. No 3-day wait for transfers to clear. Payment happens in seconds, not days. No middlemen. Your money, your control, sent directly to anyone, anywhere. Money that is truly yours. A little bit more about this. You want to pay attention to this. Promise you want to pay attention to this. For the hustle, for the home, for you, stablecoins just like USAT are not just new technology. They're a better way to manage your money. And like it says here, spend freely, get paid faster, send money home, power your vision. All right, we have to pay attention to some of the things you see here in regard to the USAT ecosystem. So there's a lot that's mentioned here. Falcon X is where we'll put a lot of focus. But you also see they got on some of these other exchanges. Obviously, who doesn't use crypto.com? Whether you use them all the time or not. I mean, who hasn't heard about them, right? And of course, MoonPay. I mean, how many times have you used basically certain DEXs and dApps to integrate MoonPay for you can have some of that fiat to be integrated in to buy your asset of whatever you're trying to purchase, especially if you're using things like Uniswap, et cetera, right? What's important to recognize is the other key findings that you see here. And it says, basically speaking, that this is approved. And like it also says, it's not legal tender, sorry. It's not issued, backed, or approved or guaranteed by the U.S. government. It's not subject to the insurance protections of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, right? The FDIC, the Securities Investor Protection Corporation, and so on and so forth. When people see that, they say to themselves, well, great. But here's the kicker. It says here, the issuer of USAT is Anchorage Digital Bank, and that is definitely worth pointing out, and I definitely want to get into why that is such a big deal. But before I do so, I want to point out this. Falcon X. We said we put some focus on this. Well, here's why. It says, empowering leading institutions globally. We work with asset managers, hedge funds, family offices, venture funds, miners, protocols, banks, and other financial institutions to help achieve their investment goals. Sounds very familiar to what you already know about. But part of their ecosystem, Standard Chartered. We know about Standard Chartered and Ripple. You also see Cantor, as in who? Cantor Fitzgerald. That's important. Why is that important? Well, numerous reasons on why that's important. But more importantly, I want to point out some other key things other than highlighting, obviously, some key people that are part of the Trump administration. I want to highlight, basically speaking, that not that long ago, on February 9th, Falcon X introduced prime brokerage margin for financing or trading on Hyperliquid. That's a new update. We also see here, basically speaking, that you have Falcon X, who acquired leading ETP provider 21 shares. Now, a lot of people do know about that, but what's really interesting, again, is that acquisition, because if you weren't aware of it, they completed the acquisition of 21 shares. And if you know about 21 shares, you know, obviously, about the whole idea of their ETP. You also know about the whole thing of how they list XRP. And more importantly, it's the expansion of all this, not just across the US, but Europe, Asia Pacific, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what I also find interesting is, again, the documentation, because shout out to Smoke, he points out 21 shares, there's only 1.7 billion XRP left on exchanges, and that is the lowest level in 7 years. And like he says, supply shock mechanism, documented. And did he post this like 2-3 years ago? No. He posted this on February 1st, still not that long ago. And as we pull up more about this, Smoke points out this in the document, literally a physical document, from 21 shares, again, like it says, by Falcon X, ETF flows and strong investor demand, and boom, right in the highlight, you see the launch of US XRP spot ETFs has fundamentally rewritten the assets demand profile, amassing over 1.3 billion in assets under management in their first month. These products recorded a historic 55-day streak of consecutive inflows, breaking all records regardless of asset class. This sustained demand signals a shift towards a pent-up demand where capital enters the market regardless of short-term price volatility. Then the bottom part, which is the big whopper that you're waiting for, at least you should be waiting for it, where it says the supply shock mechanism mirroring the GameStop revolution that sparked on Reddit, the XRP army provides an unshakable social support with exchange reserves at a 7-year low of 1.7 billion XRP. Institutional ETF demand is colliding with a community that refuses to sell. This intersection of scale and scarcity is the primary engine for a non-linear repricing throughout 2026. Doesn't say 2025, 2026. That's huge. I remember covering some of this with the late great Will Fix last year with his theory that he felt as though that there would only be around 2 billion XRP left on exchanges. Will, you got it, man. He absolutely nailed it on that one. All right? He's got to be smiling up above, right? Let's jump back to Jake. Jake points out back to this whole thing of his theory. A while back, he put out his domino theory. Financial systems aren't just connected, deeply intertwined. And again, if you really think about it, he gets really deep into all of it, right? Absolutely he does. And if anything, he has more parts. So the area I want to jump into, where he gets further into it all, is where it's actually right after the part with USDT. So if anything, let's use Control F, which is literally my best friend. And we see here, basically speaking, the wild card. So again, if you jump to right here, he points out the whole thing of the market chaos. Bitcoin is now deeply connected to traditional finance. Spot Bitcoin ETFs are live. Giants like BlackRock, Fidelity, holding significant exposure. And if stablecoin trouble causes crypto liquidity crisis, Bitcoin could crash hard. Okay. And of course, he gets more into all of it. And I encourage you to get more into what he's sharing here, because a lot of it does seem like it's pretty valid. But the bottom line is recognizing, again, 589, and again, the whole thing of the domino effect. And here's again why this is so darn important. We go back over to USAT from Tether. They got this whole thing of these announcements from an ecosystem. I think it's so important that we basically mention this. So if you weren't aware, again, Tether announces the launch of USAT, and boom, it says the federally regulated dollar-backed stablecoin made in America. So even though you don't have FDIC insurance, again, would that be part of the roadmap moving forward after things like Clarity? Could be. Again, I'm not a genie or an oracle or a fortune teller or any of that stuff, but I can put 2 and 2 together and realize, like it says on January 27th, 2026, Tether, the largest company in digital asset industry, announced at that time the official launch of USAT, federally regulated dollar-backed stablecoin, developed specifically to operate in the United States, new federal stablecoin framework established under the Genius Act. Okay? Boom, says it right there. The issuer, again, USAT, is Anchorage Digital Bank, North America's first federally regulated stablecoin issuer. And remember how we mentioned the whole thing at Cantor Fitzgerald? Listen to this. At that time, this marked the formal market introduction to USAT, follows the announcement late last year of outlining the token's design, naming former White House Crypto Council executive Bo Hines, the CEO of Tether, USAT. USAT is now available to U.S. users seeking a dollar-backed token built to operate within the U.S. dedicated federal regime. Now, if you know about Bo Hines, you know about his background with Cantor Fitzgerald. And again, what did we notice, basically speaking, in the findings? We found out, basically speaking, that when we jumped over to Falcon X, what was one of the main ones you saw listed down there? Well, there was a few, right? But boom, Cantor. As in Cantor Fitzgerald. Do you find this to be more than a coincidence? I do not. And let's also jump over to the other key findings. We see here, basically speaking, back to USAT. This represents a milestone not only for Tether, but for trajectory in the US dollar in a digital era. As a potential framework for federal oversight emerges, USAT enters a market where dollar-backed tokens already play a central role in global commerce. The launch reinforces the strength of the US dollar at a moment when countries are competing to shape the future money. What about what's going on literally in the Middle East as we speak? That's crazy, is it not? I know I'm reading a lot. Sometimes that's what I do because I don't want to skip anything, especially if it's good like this. Like this is really, this is nuts. It says, basically, it brings together scale and operational maturity for the world's most widely used stablecoin ecosystem. And again, that would be Tether. So while you're getting the reports of only the negative press on Tether, and rightfully so, I'm not trying to be an advocate for Tether, but you see here, you have this framework designed for America's most demanding institutions, signaling a new chapter. Again, go back to Trump's speech, whether you love him or hate him or whatever. I'm not trying to make it, political. I know a lot of people are still divided on it. Whatever. That's your business. Who you voted for. I don't really care. It says here, signaling a new chapter where the dollar continues to set the standard for trust, transparency, and technological leadership. So Trump mentioned in his State of the Union address, once again, what? The golden age. Literally, these are the things that are not reported on. While USDT continues to operate globally and lead the world's most widely adopted stablecoin, progressing towards Genius Act compliance, USDT is purpose-built for U.S. markets and is highly digital payment infrastructure, and it provides institutions with digital dollar that is issued through a nationally chartered bank. All right, this is the first time you've ever seen, to my knowledge, the direct mention of a digital dollar. Now, Trump said we would not get a CBDC, but people were pointing out, yeah, we are. It's going to be disguised as a stablecoin. Is this not enough evidence for that? Try your own conclusion in regard to that. USAT is issued by Anchorage Digital Bank, available to institutions or platforms alike. USAT has been designed to operate with the Genius Act's new federal stablecoin framework. U.S. regulated exchanges and banking partners being lined up to support broad access to USAT across American financial ecosystem. Cantor Fitzgerald, boom, again, serves as the designated reserve custodian and preferred primary dealer. Oh my goodness. I'm almost speechless at this point. Ensuring secure asset management and clear visibility into reserves from day one. In these terms, secure asset management, I also think of things like quant with what? SATP. And what is SATP? Secure Asset Transfer Protocol. So a protocol like that, you better believe, would work with something like a secure asset management system. And clear visible into reserves from day one. Now, if that doesn't grab your attention, nothing will. Let's enter into the quant network briefly. I'm telling you guys are in for a real treat with this, if you are here to understand the terminology. So for one, let's pull this up. I've referenced this so many times. These terms, it's like they're literally giving us clues about this. Watch this. What does it say here from docs.overledger.dev about basically last September 18th? Quant Network pointed out on September 18, 2025, this update. And in the update, they specifically mention what? Well, boil it, mash it, stick it in a stew. In this way, we will demonstrate on day one. Oh my God, my mouth is just dropping. I know I'm not supposed to sound hyped, but the research speaks for itself. Oh my goodness. Demonstrate on day one how what? Liquidity from public and permission networks can be merged in a simple and secure manner to create a unified token layer. My God. If this doesn't solve the biggest freaking mystery, I don't know who is or what. It is what it is. I'll be honest, sometimes I get frustrated. My channel does not get the attention that some other ones out there. It is what it is, right? All I can do is just basically keep plugging away and keep people informed. And I guess the main... man, frustration people get is, my videos are too long and so on. But now you understand why I get really deep with this. I do real deep dive research. Again, to create a unified token layer. People talked about the unified ledger. Tech-wise, we have continued our detailed audit analysis. What would that be through? A thing called Authorize. It's a product of Quant with the Overledger, and perform significant tests on our unified token concept. My goodness. This is crazy stuff to see, okay? Absolutely crazy. Now, let's jump back to, because you may feel as though I forgot about the whole thing of 589. No, I didn't. Springer Nature Link points out cause analysis for rail corrugation in metro lines based on system vibration characteristics. Remember how Rosie Rios literally mentioned laying down the whole thing of the rails, or more specifically, the train has left the station? I don't even need to share that video anymore. You should more than have seen that numerous times. She said that. So when we talk about rails, trains leaving the station, it's as if these cryptographers have left us clues why they're all riddlers. Seriously. I'm not even kidding. They are big time riddlers. They enjoy doing this stuff. Shout out to Greg Ballou, part of the community. We talked about this on the phone one time. Yes, I know you're listening, my brother. And you point out, basically speaking, it's like they leave little sprinkles into code, right? They do this. Shout out to you guys that analyze code. You know this. They will leave a stamp into the code. They enjoy doing things like this. So you see here, this is from 2024. And what does it mention here in the abstract? If this doesn't match up and if you're still not paying attention, I don't know what to say. All I can do is point you in the direction. I cannot force people to comprehend this. I cannot force people to all stay. Most people click off these videos. According to my analytics, most people click off these videos. It says the mechanism of rail corrugation remains unclear, and the research methods require improvement. The vibration characteristics represent the system's external manifestations, but a comprehensive analysis is still lacking. Taking the vibration characteristics of the wheel rail system. Think about that. So again, I want you to do what? Come on, let's visualize this, everybody. Let's look at the Ripple logo. Seriously, we should do this. Look at that. That's a gear. We know that. It can mean numerous things, right? But basically, let's jump back to documentation. Wheel rail system. As a starting point, this study investigates the formation mechanisms of rail corrugation on measured metro lines. What about measured blockchain and distributed ledger technology metro lines for the entire new financial system? Are we not paying attention? I think you get it. I think you really do. But I will read it just a tad bit more. It says here that you have this whole thing of the frequency response, which calculations are performed, and the relationship between the vibration responses on the wheel rail system and rail corrugation analyzed. Finally, a parameter of sensitivity analysis of the wheel rail system was conducted to control the further development of rail corrugation. Results distinct corrugation phenomena on both inner and outer rails in the measured sections. The characteristics, wavelengths, and inner-outer rail corrugation on the steel spring floating slab track are these particular frequencies, and so on. But here's where it gets really, really good. Boom, boil it, mash it, stick it in stew. Figure 14 shows the displacement frequency response curves at the outer wheel rail contact point. Analysis indicates that the eigen frequency of 589 Hz, corresponding to the peak of the displacement frequency response curves at the outer wheel rail contact point, is close to the measured outer rail corrugation passing frequency of 585, but model analysis shows that the eigen frequency of 589 Hz corresponds to the lateral bending vibration of the outer rail system mode. All right, say what you want. A bridge has a bend. I mean, call it biggest coincidence, call it nothing. And if you want to call it nothing, that's cool. I just find all this stuff interesting. I'm trying to find answers. I'm trying to find the truth just as much as anybody else. Okay? On top of that, let's jump over to here. We see in what? Other documentation, more on the whole thing of cause analysis of rail corrugation in metro lines. Okay? So for one, you literally see in the models, what? The rails, which symbolize a train going over that, right? Literally. And you see here, vibration mode corresponding to the frequency of 589 Hz indicates that a eigen frequency corresponding to the peak of displacement frequency response occurs at the outer wheel rail contact point, etc., etc. Again, some people say, well, that has nothing to do with blockchain and so on. Call it whatever you want. I do find it interesting. Again, people like Rosie Rios point out the train has left the station. And again, the mystery of 589. Now, just in case you feel as though that there's absolutely nothing here, here is, in my opinion, the icing on the cake. Now, it's one thing to talk in riddles and get all hyped about some of this stuff, but it's another thing to actually see orchestration at its finest. So I worked this together for you guys, and you're welcome to do it too. Again, if you want to verify, like, you know, is Maximus just putting a bunch of malarkey together? No. Go create an account, a free account over at make.com. You can do it yourself, okay? So I would encourage that if you want. And if anything, you can get really creative and really amaze yourself in your findings if that's your thing. Integration of Overledger, payment rails, NASA, Wells Fargo, Payrexx platforms. We will start off with Overledger. Prepare a smart contract transaction and kicking over to payment rails. Again, you ever wonder why I mention some of these things? I think you do. Create a payment, kicking it down to NASA, whether you're a fan of them or not. Let's just, you know, come on, let's just drown out that noise. All right, come back to reality and let's just, take our tinfoil hat off and all this stuff. Okay, I'm just presenting material. All right, every time I mention some of this stuff, some of you guys get just as crazy as I get when it comes to all this conspiracy stuff. NASA making an API call, kicking it up to what? Wells Fargo. Why? Because I don't know, maybe the astronaut or whoever it is, or maybe not even the astronaut, just some guy that works at NASA in Houston or wherever, Cape Canaveral, wherever. He has a Wells Fargo account. He wants to update his account balance, and for whatever reason, he's checking his email to do it. I don't know. Kicking it over to Payrexx platform to search all licenses. Now, you may be thinking, like, Payrexx, who's that? Who cares? That has nothing to do with Ripple. I don't see no XRP. Unit connected fully Maximus. Pump the brakes on that. Hear me out. Payrexx is going to search all licenses. Now, here's what's important. I asked Google in simple Google search. It says Payrexx partnered with Ripple. Based on available information, Payrexx is not directly partnered with Ripple. Oh no, Jimbo's going to come out of the woodwork. See, I told you so, Maximus. Doesn't mention anything about Ripple. You're just nonsense. All right, I hear you. This allows users to accept XRP and other cryptocurrencies through third-party integrations. Here are the details. Crypto integration. Payrexx enables merchants to accept various cryptocurrencies, including XRP, via third-party providers such as Coinbase and xMoney. By integrating these, a Payrexx user can accept XRP in their web shop, but this is a partnership with a crypto payment processor, Coinbase/xMoney, not a direct corporate partner with Ripple Labs. All right, even jumping back to here, which we're going to do, if I wanted to, I could code this. Okay, let me just show you an example. And put Coinbase in here. See that? Boom, proof of Coinbase. So does this not add up to you? It should add up to you. All right, now we're going to jump back to this. And we see here, basically speaking, as we jump over to Payrexx, what does Payrexx point out? xMoney. Why do we point out xMoney? Because literally right here, what did it mention? It says, basically speaking, this will allow integration. This will allow Payrexx users to accept XRP in their web shop. And again, through what? Coinbase/xMoney. See how I did that? And more importantly, what do we have when we go over to payrexx.com/en/xmoney? xMoney, the money of the future is here. With xMoney's payment gateway, you can accept payments in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and many others, obviously like XRP, seamlessly and securely. And the best part is that you get paid in fiat to your bank account. So if anything, guys, that's an outline. I know I went really deep in it again. And I know I'm trying my best to shorten some of these down, but shorten these videos down, but I get so deep into so many of these things. And I feel as though I need to do what I do. And other people are going to do what they do. Like Jake's going to do what he does. He's going to go on a live show and he's going to give perspective. He's going to do Q&A and all that. I may do a Q&A at some point myself. Maybe I'll talk more about like AI or whatever. But let everybody do what they do and how they do it, including myself. And if anything, thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you guys listening to these deep dive outlines. Simply do me a solid. If you listen to the entire outline, and simply type in this key phrase into the comments, and it's two options, and that is 589 mystery solved or 589 I'm not sold on it being solved, something like that. All right, or you just type in 589 and that's fine. It lets me know if you listen to the entire outline. Saying goes, know what you have, know why you hold it. The research trumps FUD 110%. May the Lord Jesus bless you all. I truly mean that. We'll see you guys in the next video, which will probably be coming out later today or tomorrow, depending on the schedule. Over and out. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
After these messages, we'll be right back. Yeah.
I have many friends that are earning every single day trading futures on BTCC. It's a simple process, and even if you don't want to learn how to trade, you could follow a trader on the site and let him do the trading for you. And again, I'm not trying to have any of you guys use your hard-earned money to lose anything. You don't know what you're doing? Don't jump into this, but there is money to be made, and don't use your nest egg for leverage trading. Use a separate portfolio. But I suggest learn how to trade. Earn you some extra money on BTCC. It's easy. You don't have to KYC, and you don't have to use a virtual private network VPN. This is a wonderful site. They've been around since 2011. Give them a shot. Also, when you earn that extra money, you can store that on your Decent wallet. The Decent wallet was not affected by the XRPL debacle, where the backdoor of many wallets was open and there was a breach. So Decent wallet was not affected by that. Decent wallet is as safe as you keep your seed phrase. It's a wonderful product, and you can get the discount by using the link. It's the only way to get the affiliate discount, and that is to use an affiliate link. So that link is popping up on the upper right side of your screen, and it is the one that you will use. You will also get free shipping. Pick you up a decent wallet today. Secure your assets. If you don't have them stored in a wallet and sitting on an exchange, then you're at risk. So pick you one up today. Thank you.